Welcome back to another episode of Other People's Lives. I'm Greg Dybeck.
I'm Joe Santagato. For those of you who are just listening, you can now watch our show on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/otherpeopleslives for that.
Yes, and as usual, we've got the guest on the line. Why don't you tell the viewers and listeners what we'll be talking about today?
Okay, so today I guess we'll be talking about preppers.
So when you say preppers, what exactly do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Preppers are people who prepare for, I guess, disasters or incoming disasters, things that might disrupt your life for a long period of time. This is what we prepare for.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know if this is like a term you use, but I think a lot of people refer to it as like doomsday preppers. Is that accurate?
No, not even close, because doomsday means that it's the end of the world. Nothing we get ready for is the end of the world because you can't prepare for the end of the world because it's the end. So it's a heist. It's a Hollywood term. It's a term to get more people to watch your TV shows or read your books, but it's not a real term.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's good to, I think, clear that up, because I think the idea of prepping is something that, there's obviously a lot of misconceptions around, and I think something that has kind of been seen under the Hollywood lens, like you've said, where, it's people, I guess, essentially like survivalists who are kind of preparing and gathering a lot of supplies for, certain disasters. But that's obviously not how, I think the average person is going about their life in terms of preparation. So can see why it kind of falls under that, Hollywood lens of something, a lifestyle to look at in a strange way.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, like, what exactly do you specifically prepare for, and how do you exactly go about that? Like, what's the most essential part of prepping?
The essential part of prepping is food and water, right? All the other gadgets and and the doodads, those are just like things you need, but it's not essential. Food and water are essential. You need that to survive, right? Then if you have medical ailments, whatever that is, diabetes, heart problems, lung problems, you're going to need your medication. So medications are also part of that essential. And then communication, but that comes like last, because communication, you don't really, I mean, it's nice to communicate with other people, but it's not essential. Right, it's good to know what's going on around you and what people are going through, but food, water, and your medicines are essential. Anything that's going to keep you alive.
So how much food and water do you say that you have, like, ready, packed up in your place?
In my apartment right now, I would say probably 8 or 9 months.
Wow.
So you just like non-perishable, I'm assuming canned foods or frozen meats or what?
Well, yeah, frozen meats, but it's more canned goods. I mean, the frozen meats are a luxury, right? So if the power goes out, now you gotta eat, like, I don't know, something like 20 pounds or 30 pounds of meat in a few days. That is right. There's ways of going about it: cooking it, salting it, and then letting it and preserving it. You can do that as well, but especially during the winter months. But like I said, the frozen meats and frozen vegetables, those are luxuries. So until you lose the power, those are part of your food supply. And then after you lose power, you only got maybe a week or two at best. Um, Depends on your cooler system and how you keep it cool. You add that in there as well. But canned goods, MREs, those camping foods, those are a way to go because those things last a long time.
What are some of the other things that you have in terms of supplies? Like, can you kind of walk us through, what your apartment looks like, how all this is stored, packaged, and I guess how like quickly accessible it is to get all these things?
Well, the food and water are like pretty much out in the open. Water we have stored, but we're not entertaining that yet because we have we still have running water.
Mhm.
Should that get shut down, now we have to rely on our water supply.
What about things like weapons or things like that might be needed in different environments, like wilderness, for example, or something like that?
What, you like weapons?
Huh?
You talking about weapons?
Yeah, yeah, and just anything else that like because I've seen obviously you've been covered before for this where it seems like you have a lot of kind of like equipment like ready at your disposal and like weapons. I think I saw bulletproof vests and things like that.
Well, I mean, I don't have any stuff. I live sick, so um, I refuse to pay, like a gun license for $500 and you know, I don't know, $200 to get a weapon when it's supposedly our constitutional right. But because I refuse to pay it, I don't have any weapons. I mean, the closest I get to a weapon is a fancy display sword, samurai sword, and a baseball bat. That's probably about as good as it gets for me.
So what inspired you, to kind of take on this lifestyle and explore it? Because I know you're in New York City, which is interesting, as are we, and we live in an environment where I mean, the two of us will be the first to admit that I don't think we're prepared for much, and I think we live in kind of the luxury of convenience and everything at our disposal. So especially being in an urban area like this, what inspired you to start prepping?
Well, I read a book, and in this book, the power goes out for a long period of time. And when you read the book, there's a part in the book that sticks out in mind. It's where the people are starving, the people in town are starving, and the hero of the book goes, "I wish I would have had gotten more before this happened." And him just saying that was like, "Holy shit!" So then you finish reading the book, and then you go to the end, and Newt Gingrich is talking about how this is a possibility, how it's a real possibility considering we have like six nuclear warheads missing, and not the United States but Russia, and they're floating around the world somewhere, and any of these terrorists can launch these missiles and detonate an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and shut down the power grid of the United States and or any other country that they want to target. So after seeing how real it was and then going to the empcommission.org's website and looking at that, you're like, this shit is real. So I started preparing.
How long ago did you read this book?
Oh shit. I think 10 years ago.
Oh, so you've been prepping for that long.
Yeah, about 8 years now. Right. So I would probably say 9 years ago I read the book.
What are some of the disasters that you have in mind when it comes to prepping? Like, I'm sure I assume there's not one situation that you're prepping for, but what would kind of fall under a list of like disasters or things that could occur where prepping would come in handy?
The financial collapse, like what we're seeing now. Um, Pandemic, which we're seeing now. Hurricanes, earthquakes, which just happened in where the hell was that earthquake?
I believe in Utah.
Utah. Okay. Um, Tornadoes, storm, fire in your apartment, loss of jobs, which we're seeing now. There's a multitude of things. Martial law,
Mm-hmm.
which I keep hearing might be happening soon. Um, so like I said, it's a multitude of things you get ready. Blackouts, right? So it's a multitude of things.
So and you feel confident that you would be prepared for anything like that to, I guess, on the extreme end of the spectrum, if there was like civil unrest or a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, and you had to kind of like move your family, and get out. You're confident on your kind of like survival skills and the prepping that you've done.
Survival skills, yes. Moving my preps, that would be an issue, right? Because it's a lot to move. Now in hindsight, with everything happening, I wish I would have gotten like a little bug out shelter somewhere else. But such is life.
What's a bug out shelter?
So bug out shelter is a home away from home where you go to get away from, let's say, the city, right? So if you live in the city like I do, you want a location where it's less populated. it's considered a bug out location or a bug out shelter.
Hmm.
Interesting. So I've seen like there's that show. I mean, Doomsday Preppers. Like they have like underground bunkers, all these things, and they stack all the food and whatever like hygienic supplies or whatever. So I guess that's kind of what you're referring to, where it would be like a separate location where you could store all this stuff. It doesn't necessarily take up space in your current living situation, but you do have a place to go to where it's stocked up, so that you can survive whatever natural disaster or whatever is affecting the world, right?
Um, I mean, yeah, I guess it's that's a. I guess it's like just a sort of a harder question to answer.
Okay. So I mean, currently we're going through like coronavirus and the pandemic in the world, and I think there's going to be like a shelter in place kind of thing into effect pretty soon, probably. But you feel confident that your apartment, you're good to go. You have everything you need. Is there anything that you don't have that you like wish you had more of at the moment?
Wish I had more of. I wish I had weapons. I know that much. Um, that listen. Every time I touch on the weapons thing, it pisses me off because it's something that you need to protect yourself with, and yet we are entering an era right now where the possibility of needing one becomes more and more every day. And that's what I wish I had. Like as far as food goes and medicines and things like that, I think we're squared away. We're squared away for about a year or so. If we start rationing off right away, I can extend this probably to 18 months. But the only thing I wish we had more of were weapons.
You have your fear that people are going to start looting and breaking into places, and is that
Yeah, if there's a lockdown, if there's a shortage on food, there's a shortage on water, people will be crime will skyrocket. Crime in New York City was skyrocketing as it is, um, just because of that whole bail reform bullshit. But now that you're if cops start getting sick and there's less of them on the street, crime's going to go up. If there's no food, crime is definitely going to spike. If there's no water, forget it, right? So the essentials that preppers store, people want.
right?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting because Joe just mentioned coronavirus. Where I think the average person is starting to experience, the thought of prepping probably for the first time in their lives. I know for me, um, I'm not panic buying or anything like that, but there is just kind of that, I guess, like innate sense in us that okay, when there's uncertainty on the horizon, when there could be some sort of civil unrest, we want to prepare, but you know we don't. Most people are not preparing until it kind of hits that sort of breaking point, which I think we see now, with panic buying, with stores running out of things, with maybe people buying too much of even the wrong thing like toilet paper. But it is interesting that now everyone is kind of thinking in a bit of a prepper mindset, where I think in the past it was something that was laughable to a lot of people, something that had a lot of misconceptions, where people would just assume like, you're crazy if you're prepping so much, nothing's going to happen. What's the problem? The world's not going to end. There's not going to be a disaster. And we obviously find ourselves in a different environment right now.
Well, absolutely right. So now the whole woulda, coulda, shoulda is starting to hit a lot of people. I have people contacting me almost every day now. What can I do to prep? I just started. Could you give me any pointers? And so I'm giving people pointers. I'm not going to sit there and go, fuck you. You should have did this years ago when we told you to.
Right.
That's not how I operate anyway. But it's just it's not that it's annoying. It's just it sucks that people are waking up, but they're waking up when it's too late. And we knew this as preppers. We knew when a pandemic hits or when something bad hits, people were going to start scrambling. Meanwhile, we were the laughing stock of the nation, and now people are looking to us for guidance.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting switch for sure.
Yeah, it is. And but you know what? Like I said, I knew this was going to happen, so I'm not surprised. None of it surprising me. None of the people contacting me, none of the news media is contacting us. It's not a surprise. It's to be expected. It's why I don't laugh at people. I don't told you so. You know, I just go, okay, this is what you do. You know, because
So
I was ready for. I was listen. As a prepper, you get ready for a lot of shit, right? You get ready for everything. You even get ready for this. You get ready for people bombarding you with questions and tips and why and how comes because we knew this was going to happen.
So what specifically, if someone comes to you and is like, I need help on how to prepare, like I'm sure there's people who are going to be listening to this that aren't necessarily prepared to deal with the current pandemic that we're dealing with. What is like a very like quick summary of, what people should be doing, where they could buy these things, what specifically can they buy?
Well, what specifically they should be buying now is food and water. Food actually, because our water supply is good, and instead of buying water, you should be getting water jugs or buckets that you can seal and storing water in those. But as far as food wise, just go to the supermarket every day. Try to get there in the morning after the old people go, and either sit online or walk in and start buying canned goods. Even making now at this point, you might even have to start making sacrifices on eating certain things. Like vegans are always contacting me. I'm like, yo, you're a vegan out of luxury, not because it's how the world was run. So I said you might have to start eating meat. You know, some people I never eat meat. I said you better start because you're not growing plants on your windowsill, especially if you live in the city. If you live in a country, you can still get away with being a vegan. But if you live in New York City, the likeliness of um, vegan meals go down. And not for nothing, but I call vegans on their bullshit because a lot of people are sending me pictures of vegan meals still on the shelves and everything else is gone. So
Mm,
what does that say about vegans?
they're not prepping.
They're not prepping or they're full of shit and they're buying all the meat stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Do you do you think people are prepping incorrect? Like, is there? I think that's good advice on what to do. What's the kind of what not to do? Because I think part of the fear, um, in part of the fear that a lot of people have right now is that people are kind of incorrectly prepping now for coronavirus, buying the wrong things. Is Do you have any like do not do this strategy for right now?
Yeah, don't be an asshole. Don't fucking run to the supermarket and grab 25 cases of paper towels.
Mm-hmm.
Only buy one or two a week until we get to a point where we're on complete lockdown, which I do see coming. The more I start talking to people in the know, the more they start mentioning, they went from it's a possibility, it could happen to it looks like it's going to happen soon.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, a nationwide lockdown seems to be imminent, and we should start getting prepared slowly. Not fighting over cans and this and just get enough. Get enough for like 2 3 months, right? And then let somebody else get, canned goods and what you call it, paper towels and medical supplies for 2 3 months. Don't be the asshole that runs out and buys $1,700 worth of shit just so that you can sell it off to somebody else.
Yeah, I guess there really is a fear in trusting other people in times like this. It's kind of hard to imagine that everyone like I want to have faith in humanity, but it's hard to imagine everyone coming together and being kind in that sense or considerate with prepping. Like you kind of assume everyone will be selfish, which I guess you have to be to an extent, but I think too much could be detrimental.
Well, there's a side of being selfish, right? So now, um, humans are selfish in nature, but when you start preparing, you start realizing that you don't have to be selfish,
Right. Because
and you start realizing that if everyone prepared, everyone would be squared away. Hell, if 50% of the population prepared, you could feed one other person,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's not the case. That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the assholes and people who are looking for opportunities to make money. Those are the people who you smack in the back of the head with a baseball bat because those are societal. uh, enemies. They're the people who, if the shit is really on and the chips are down and there's no help, no cops, no military in the street, those are the people who are going to inevitably rape what's left of the system.
Yeah, I'm also interested. With prepping, obviously stepping away from kind of coronavirus in certain time and specific times. Um, you've been doing this for a while. Do you know about like how much money you've spent on this? Like, I would assume you consider it, to be a worthwhile investment. But does it take a decent amount of money to prep properly or no?
Over the years, yeah, but that's over years. It's over like 8 years of preparing. But I would say I spent a little over 10 grand.
Okay.
That's not much when you're
It's
talking about
it's
8 years.
yeah.
Yeah, that's not a lot of money when you think about it. There are people who've invested. We're talking about $200,000-300,000 worth
Yeah.
over 10 years. So small change compared to other people. Like if
Yeah.
I had my own land, do not get me wrong, I would have probably invested about that much. But I don't. I have an apartment, so I have to keep it simple.
So okay, so that's interesting because I know, as much as we say some of it is kind of under that Hollywood lens, there's definitely, I think a spectrum with preppers where there definitely are people building bunkers, having years worth of supplies, mounting guns around, a shelter that they've built for themselves,
Right.
underground. But that's something that you think if you had the space, you would be interested in prepping to that extent?
Yeah, absolutely. If I had the land, I would definitely I would have gone bananas. I would have had a garden. I would have had a chicken coop, some livestock. That's the kind of prepping I wish I would have done. Like again, thinking that I was going to retire in 5 years and get the hell out of the city. This happened a lot faster than I would have liked to have happened.
Hmm.
So we just have to plan accordingly.
Yeah. I have a sort of, I guess you could call it like a moral question. So, like, not to get Hollywood about it, but
Right.
I think the way we've seen prepping or the way we've seen, I don't want to call it apocalyptic, but kind of like a post disaster. I'm literally in the middle of watching a movie now, which is so weird. I think it's called Light of My Life.
Light of My Life. Yeah, that was a good movie.
Yeah, so it's like Casey Affleck. It's like him and his daughter, and it's they survivalist kind of in a world, sort of post-apocalyptic in the sense that I think all the females have like died, so it's like just men on the earth, and they're moving, setting up camp, kind of going to houses similar to The Road, which I think
You're
maybe more
watching it
people.
now?
Yes, I'm literally in the middle of watching it before I even knew we were going to have this conversation. Um,
Okay.
but my question to you is like, is that a situation that you see yourself prepared for as well? Like if you kind of had to be
Move.
nomadic, bring your
Yeah,
family, survive, use like wilderness skills, move place to place. That's something that you're prepared for as well.
yeah. I could. We can do it if we absolutely had to.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. And my question was going to be like, if you were able to have kind of that land where you set up, a bunker, a garden, shelter, and things like that, and you were housing your family and you had supplies. This is in the scope of kind of like a movie, but if people were nomadic and that's what the world had become, and you people came across your shelter and bunker, would you be open to letting people in and kind of like sharing that experience with them, or does that have to be a hard no for safety? Like, are you prepared to make decisions like that?
Okay, if I had land where I can take on some people, I would, but it would be people I know.
Mm.
I wouldn't take on a stranger. The problem with helping people is I can help people abroad. Meaning, if you need like some canned goods, I can give you some cans. I can give you a bag of rice. But I am not going to sit there and entertain a total stranger without getting to know them,
Mm.
because people are motherfuckers, and um, people will, how do you say?
Take
They will
advantage of
take
it.
advantage of you if
Yeah.
they can.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about if the world were to ever, experience a situation like that, which we're talking
Yeah.
about, total disaster, completely changing the fabric of society, or society doesn't exist. It's interesting because it's, yeah, how much trust can you put in the other people out there who are also looking out for themselves?
When you were talking about that before too, and you were saying how, people go out and they panic buy, they buy all this stuff, and there's other people who are like, well, I'm not going to do that because then it takes away from other people who need it as well. There's also some people that wouldn't necessarily do it, but they feel like now I have to because everyone else is going to panic buy.
Yeah.
So now I have to panic buy. And that's why also there's just like not enough supplies. Like they don't have enough medical supplies at the hospitals now because like there's no masks. There's just like a lot of stuff like that. So it's just like kind of a vicious circle there. So I mean, I necessarily am not prepared, and I'm not a prepper by any means, but after having this conversation, and obviously like we're going through a time where it would have paid off to be prepared, talking to you and kind of hearing, it just sounds very simple. Like it doesn't cost much money. It's over this course of 8 years. And then when it happens, it's like you're chilling. You're not worried about it. There's no panic buying. I don't have to rely on other people not buying the things that I need because I have it and I could store it and it's, whatever. So I think that, the fact that being prepared and prepping is just, it's only to your benefit. It's nothing bad,
Right, and the thing with prepping is it also gets you prepared mentally for a lot of shit that can happen. So, again, being prepared for this and watching this shit unfold is it's interesting because exactly what's happening is what I've been thinking. Now there are some people emailing me some far off things that are going to happen, and I'm like, you know what? I entertain everything, right? I entertain this ending in 2 months, which is highly unlikely, to this ending in 18 months, which is more like it. And that's the total. That's the full aspect of it. That's the virus dying off. That's the economy starting to bounce back, because we're going to be in this rut with the economy for a bunch of years now. So the worse the economy gets, the longer this goes. So I entertain a lot of shit. I entertain martial law. I'm entertaining lockdowns. I'm also entertaining that it might not go this far. It might just, be a soft lockdown, which New York City is sort of in. No one's saying it, but we're in a soft lockdown. No restaurants, no museums, no Broadway shows, right? No eating out. So we're in a soft lockdown. Once we go to a hard lockdown, that'll be a different ball game altogether.
Yeah, I just feel like we kind of all, in a way, have like a fantasy of being put to the test of like surviving in that quote unquote like post-apocalyptic world. I think it's and that's why it's interesting to speak to someone who would potentially be prepared for something that dramatic, because it's like, that's why it's fun to watch movies like that. But
Right.
in that situation, I mean, I don't think I could even start a fire if I had to, which I'm assuming is something you can obviously easily do amongst
that's
other
why
things.
I tell people all the time they should be practicing this shit. They shouldn't. No one. They see that the problem with humans today is we become relied on a system that wants us to rely on them, right? So we sit there and want to rely on the government to feed us and take care of us when we get sick. Instead, we should be doing it on our own. This is what people were put on the planet for. We weren't put on the planet to rely on the system. So if this system was completely implode, which is like unlikely because there's so many things in place, but if it did, so many people would die. And not from sickness and illnesses, from not knowing how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we ended up outdoors, a lot of people wouldn't know how to hunt. They wouldn't know how to get their own food. They wouldn't know how to dress their own food. They wouldn't know how to fish. These are basic human skills that we've forgotten. And in some form or another, we're going to start feeling it. People are going to start seeing this, because this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. That's the other problem. People do not see it that way. These young kids today who are running around going to a spring break, those assholes that were on a boat in Florida are going to get each other sick, and some of them are going to wind up going back home and taking it home to their parents. And that's the problem. The kids can handle it. The older people can't.
Yeah, it's those people wouldn't survive very long outdoors.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't think.
No.
No, a lot of people won't. Listen, some people are smart. Some people can, shoot from the hip, right? There's a movie with Ellen Page. I think it's called Into the Forest,
Hmm.
and that's a really good survival movie. And not a pandemic, but like an EMP happens, and it's two sisters surviving in those trying times. And they were shooting from the hip. They were reading books. They were trying to remember what their father taught them. So it was really good. But there are people who can do that. But the rest of society who can't, well, they're fucked.
I think also like what 80% of our population is in urban areas, which you kind of just have to assume that's a lot of people who don't have survival or outdoor skills.
Yeah.
Right. And they're as good. And I'm gonna say they're as good as dead.
Yeah, that's me for sure.
I also think like the biggest aspect too for me thinking about it, like being prepared, just mentally what that does to you, like, and your stress levels, like keeping them as low as possible, because a lot of people, like, although it is a time to be informed, it's not a time for panic. Like if you're prepared, there is no reason to panic, and that like would do wonders for like your mental health and like keeping your stress levels down. Is I know once this pops off, I have canned goods, I have water, I have this, I have that. I'm prepared for this, so I don't have the same worries as a lot of other people, and I just think about that aspect of it as well. Like that's a huge selling point for me as well. It's just being like, if shit were to pop off, I'm not necessarily in a panic because I'm prepared for this. And you talked about that too, of like you were already thinking about the possibility of this happening. Like for me, before this happened, we're not even thinking about it. We're not thinking about there ever being a reason why we can't go outside or martial law or any of this. But for someone who is prepping, you see all the stuff on your counter every day. It's like a subconscious reminder of like, this could happen one day. And, just being prepared for it mentally and everything, it just makes for a smoother transition. So kind of sold me on, that, to be honest. Like it just makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah. Listen, I mean, now you see the problem is now it's making sense to people.
Right.
Hmm.
Right before, again, it was just a joke. That being said, it's I think personally it's imperative that everyone starts prepping out, especially if this blows over or when it blows over. This will this is just something some people should start entertaining. To be self-reliant, shit. I'm not saying grab two sticks, run out in the woods, and start a fire, but I am saying that we should be more self-reliant. We should start getting our own shit together, possibly growing a garden on the rooftop of your building, things like that. So that we're just not because the government is being taxed right now. The shit that they're throwing at us, if you do the math, and I suck at math, man, but if you do the math, the government is not going to be able to keep this up too much longer. I give them 6 months before they completely implode and won't be able to handle this.
Yeah, no, I think me and Joe were talking before this of there's the silver lining in the sense that people can come out of this with a lot of good habits. I think a lot
Right.
of skills that they didn't have before. And yeah, I think to what Joe was saying before, it's just I think the average person walks around feeling invincible. Like I think that's just that's how we feel, and it's a mechanism to get us through daily life. Obviously, if we walked around with the thought of we're all going to die one day and we're not invincible, that wouldn't be much of a society. But to have the awareness that disaster could happen and to be self-reliant, like you said, I think the word prepper, the connotation it's taken on is crazy, over dramatic, too much. What are you prepping for? Nothing's going to happen. But talking to someone like you, who seems reasonable about it, like you just are really making, I think, us understand that it just means prepared. We prepare in so many things in our life,
Right.
and it's just being prepared for multiple outcomes.
Well, it's like being prepared. Car insurance. I try to make it as easy as people understand. We all have car insurance, right?
Mm.
But we also have some kind of insurance just in case we get hurt, our car gets damaged. We have phone insurance in case you lose your phone, right? This is like insurance. This is ensuring me that my family is going to stay fed and healthy during trying times. That's all it
Mm.
is.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it too. And I think the problem with the whole prepper thing is that the only ones that get any sort of recognition for the most part are the ones that get blown out of proportion, or the ones who are talking about like, well, if a nuclear bomb were to land on my house, I have this underground tunnel, and like they have all these like, it's like on the very grand scale. But you're just like,
Right.
listen, you need food and water, so we're prepared to like for the
Right.
next 9 months if we need to. Like that is a lot different than someone being like, buy all the shampoo you can because you might not be able to wash your hair. And
Yeah,
like,
I'm sure there's people out there like literally preparing for zombie apocalypses,
Right.
and like obviously people take every aspect of life to the extreme.
Well,
But
yeah,
you know,
you got people preparing for the zombie apocalypse with the coronavirus. You got people going, remember, in what was it, I Am Legend, and I forgot the other movie, the zombie apocalypse was started because of a cure. And I was like, of course someone took that angle and turned it into a zombie apocalypse.
yeah.
is there, this, maybe it's an unfair question, but is there any desire, like, not that you're enjoying this moment because people are dying, obviously it's a pandemic,
Right.
but do you ever almost hope for situations where you are able to kind of like prove your skills to yourself? Like, we've spoken to soldiers and veterans before,
Right.
or even like firefighters, where it's like, is there ever just that feeling inside, even if it's suppressed, where it's like you want action to kind of prove these skills that you've developed?
Yes and no. I mean, one part. Like, listen, if I was single by myself, but I was a prepper, I'd be like, yes, let's get it on. But when you have wife and kids,
Mhm.
it's a different ballgame because now you don't want them to be affected by it. But one side is a little exciting because I'm like, how much food? Like the rationing thing, for example. We already started a rationing protocol, right? We're still buying food. There's still food on the
Do you mean
market.
your family?
Yeah, yeah. The kids are not. They eating 3 times a day. Myself, I'm eating anywhere between 2 to 1 times a day, right? And more like 1 times a day, just to have the food go a little longer. Because if I start rationing myself, I can sustain on one meal a day, uh, even with this bullshit going on, and I'll be fine. I mean, I might be a little cranky from time to time, but I'll be fine. Because I do think this is going to go on a hell of a lot longer than 6 months.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we really appreciate the insight and the honesty here. I think, especially in the times we're in, this is a really helpful conversation. I think people, and us included, are going to be able to take something out of it, even if it's on a smaller scale, of how to start preparing for, like you said, what the next 18 months could be. So we definitely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Not a
thank you, man.
problem.
Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Yes, sir.
All right. Have a
Thank you,
good one, and stay safe out there.
You too, guys. Be good.
See ya. Our sponsor for today is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. So things like classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, graphic design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. It offers classes designed for real life so you can move your creative journey forward without putting your life on hold. It's a very useful thing. I've used it a couple times for graphic design because it's always been something I wanted to get into. And now, you just pay an annual subscription, which is less than $10 a month. And you get to do that, especially when you compare it to pricey in-person classes or workshops and things like that. So if you want to take your creative journey to the next step and you want to, get some new skills, definitely check out Skillshare. But yeah, you can explore your creativity and get 2 months free of premium membership at Skillshare.com/OPL. Definitely go on there and check out all the classes they have. I mean, I just read a couple of them, but there's a ton of classes you could take. So go check it out because you might be able to get some knowledge from there. Okay. Again, 2 months free with premium membership at Skillshare.com/OPL. Unlimited access to thousands of classes for free. Okay. Just get started by joining today. Skillshare.com/OPL. All right. 2 months for free. Why not? All right. Free 2 months. Classes galore. Skillshare.com/OPL. All right, so
Joe's a prepper.
I'm not. I'm just saying it makes a lot of sense because I will say that like the only people that get on TV, like the show's called Doomsday Preppers, and they go to some random place where they have some guy with this like hidden bunker, and it's all made out of like stainless steel, and he's talking about how, you know, if there's gonna be a chemical war one day and people are gonna be dying, and like, look, I have like 5 layered of doors, and like, you know, blah blah blah. I have 1,000 things of shampoo, and it's like, this is overkill, dude.
Right. Which, not to say that can't happen, but
Yeah,
is it
of course.
worth the effort, the time, and the thought to prepare to that degree for something like that?
Right. And it's like this, what this guy is telling us is way more, it makes a lot more sense. It almost makes me want to be like, you know, well, why not? When we get out of this, like, why not just go get a bunch of canned goods and like keep it in the garage? Like, what's the difference?
Just to be slightly more prepared.
When do canned goods go bad?
Well, I think they have a shelf life of years, which is good, you know?
Yeah. And it's just like, it's like, why not? I mean, it does make sense. And the one thing that he said that did really resonate with me is that, like, I consider myself, like, I don't like relying on people at all, but we are, as people in this world, we are relying on the government in the system to take care of us, and not taking care of ourselves, you know, and like, you think you're being self-sufficient, but you are relying on a lot here, but you can use the system to your advantage and kind of prepare yourself that if I can't rely on a system because it's broken or because of whatever, that I can still survive. And it's not going to be like, well, what do I do now?
Yes. And I feel like preppers definitely get a lot of shit because a lot of them clearly lean a certain way. And I think there's a lot of distrust of the government. There's a lot of, you know, Second Amendment backers and things like that, which is understandable. But I think the way you just put it is true. It's like, even if you're not someone who distrusts the government or thinks we don't need government or a system in place, just to have that fail-safe of self-reliance, if the system does fail completely, why wouldn't you want to have some semblance of that? You know what I mean? But it's just, it's interesting to have this conversation now. And it's crazy to see, you know, to that point, like, when was the last time we like needed the government for something? You know what I mean? It's like, it's interesting now where like when the government is really stepping in and kind of showing what government does for people and the decisions they have to make for the economy, for people, for businesses, to quarantine, to stop spreading a pandemic. So it's, you know, we're living through an interesting time too of so much government involvement, where I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think a lot of it's necessary right now. But it's interesting because that doesn't happen too often.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, like I said, I think it just makes sense. And another thing that like resonated was he was talking about like car insurance. It's like people get at preppers because they're like, you're saving for like, it's probably not going to happen. And yes, car accidents are way more common than, you know, situations like this, but it's sort of the same thing. And it probably costs less than car insurance. Fucking, I know that first fucking hand. But you pay and you stack, and you can, I mean, you could use it along the way theoretically and be like, oh, I just need to use this can of whatever real quick. But like, you can have that. And then in the event that it happens, it's like, well, thank God I had that, because it's the same thing with like health insurance, for instance, which is like wildly expensive. And then on the off chance that you have to have a big surgery or something that would otherwise cost you like $100,000,
right?
You know, it's like,
that's why it really fits like, into that same context.
Yeah, it does, and it makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. I'm a little more optimistic about the world, but I think that the general idea of prepping isn't crazy, and it shouldn't have some like, you know, stigma attached to it. Like preparing at all. When is preparing a bad thing? I don't think it's like a bad thing. I don't think it can hurt anybody.
Right. It's negative in this sense for some reason, but that is again just the Hollywood aspect of it, and people who take it to the extreme. Yeah. There's obviously people out there who just, you know, take it too far, but yeah, it's not a bad thing. Also, like the survivalist aspect is really interesting to me, to
Right.
be prepared in that way as well. Because there's one thing to stock up on goods. It's another thing. Like, I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't wish we all had certain basic skills
Yeah.
to, I don't know what direction you're going in. Like,
Yeah, I don't even know where west is.
like where the North Star is. Know just how to, get around, a sense of direction, fire, cooking, like,
And
very basic things.
When you really think about it, now with the way the world is going, where technology is so prevalent and things are just becoming more and more, technology based, we're losing these skills. We're becoming further and further distant from these like skills. Like,
And there's also no reason to acquire them
that's what I mean.
In our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no reason to have them, but these things can happen and they will continue to happen for the rest of time. Like, things like this will pop up. I mean, it just, history repeats itself, and it happens every like 100 years or something. Something like a pandemic or whatever. But I think that it would be even more important now to have these skills, because we are in a world where not a lot of people are having this. Like, maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, there was a higher percentage of people that knew a little more about a lot of other things, but now we rely so much on technology. We have instant gratification from like, oh, there's an app for this, there's that, there's that. I don't have to worry about where I'm going because I have GPS. But before that, people had to know shit. Like, my dad knows how to get to here to Alabama. I don't know fucking how.
People used to read maps.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's like, that's a different kind of skill than anything else. Like, now that you have GPS, you don't have to do that. Like, oh, I don't have that. But like, if GPS was just not a thing anymore, how are you going to get around?
Yeah. When the systems fail, if technology is not available, if we lose the kind of blanket of convenience that allows us to live the lives we live.
Are you still self-sufficient?
Exactly.
And that's being actually self-sufficient.
Yeah. And look, I'll say the answer is no, but
yeah,
it's
definitely
something to think about. Also, that guy really hates vegans.
Yeah, he hates you.
I'm not like a real vegan. I didn't
know.
bring it up. I'm like 90% vegan.
That I would consider that
80% vegan.
I would consider that pretty.
I'm vegan like on the weekdays. I don't subscribe to one diet, but I'm fairly vegan.
Okay.
That's all. But I wasn't going to tell that guy that.
Yeah, no. He would have fucked you up.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, really, really cool, because I think this is just the perfect time to have a conversation like that. And I'm really glad that we were able to speak to someone, kind of reasonable about the way that they prep, and not, something more shock value that's kind of out there.
Right.
While that's a fun conversation as well, I think for what globally we're all going through right now in this pandemic, this is a very interesting conversation to have, and that was the perfect person.
Yeah, I agree. So for anyone out there who you think, if you have a good thing for the show, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Go to oplshow.com/contact, send us an email, and if it fits, we'll schedule something out.
Yes, and like Joe said in the beginning, we are on YouTube, so if you're listening to this, you can also watch it at youtube.com/otherpeopleslives. We're on Instagram at OPL Podcast. Leave a rating and a review on iTunes, because that always helps. And, most of all, stay safe out there. Mm-hmm. Stay sane if you're isolating. Social distancing it's tough. It's not what we're used to, but yeah, I think, like we touched on, I think a lot of good habits can come out of this, and we'll all learn a lot about ourselves, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah. And that is all. See you guys next time.